Welcome into the Ben Burnett Show on Extra 106.3, Atlanta's only news and conservative talk station. My guest for the entire hour this weekend is Attorney General Christopher Carr. Chris, welcome to the show.
Man, thank you. And you said Christopher. My mom was basically the only one ever called me Christopher. I love it.
All the time or when you were in trouble?
Just most of the time, but certainly there was a little bit more passion behind it when I was in trouble.
What's your middle name? Did that come out a lot?
Michael.
Christopher Michael Carr?
You got it.
Yeah.
That when that cascade started, I knew it was real.
Talk to me about growing up. I know we've done this. For those of you, you can go find the archives because one time Chris ran for re-election for Attorney General and came to do the show. He's a proud wearer of Ben Burnett Show clothes, which you haven't done that in a while.
And usually I've got a sheriff's Yeti today, but oftentimes my wife Joan and I use the Ben Burnett Yeti.
I have them. I get pictures on Instagram all over the world.
You should. It's excellent.
It was really expensive to do that, though. Really expensive. It was like $35 a piece, and that was like the discount. It might be cheaper now, but people ask, "Can I get another Yeti?" I was like, "I haven't run those in years."
Great marketing.
I don't know if I got anything out of it, but I appreciate it. Talk to me about growing up in Dunwoody and going to high school, choosing college. What in the hell got you interested in public service?
Absolutely.
So on and so forth.
So my family moved down here when I was in kindergarten. I was born in Michigan. We came down here because my dad had started his own business, and this is where the industry was. This is where the business was. And so moved down here in 78. He was in the van business, and so we also saw what the federal government can do to impact a business, because in the early 80s they changed the fuel economy standards, so this industry my dad was in hit some tough times, and my mom says that there was a period of time where we had about $16 in the bank account, so it was rough. But saw my dad change, got into pickup trucks and that kind of thing. But Georgia was really this place of hope for us, and really turned out to be a great place for us to be. So went to public school for elementary school, went to Marist High School, and then went to Georgia. And it just seemed Georgia was the right thing for me at the time. And my parents had just gotten divorced, and so went to Georgia. Was a business major because my dad was in business, loved business, glad I did it. So I was an international business major with a marketing emphasis. And while I was there, had gotten to know this guy named Kevin Isakson, because I was in the Interfraternity Council, did some campus politics. And then right after I graduated, his dad, who I'd voted for governor in 1990, decided to run for the U.S. Senate. And I'd always loved politics, been all my life as a kid. So again, being from Michigan, my parents tell me that in 1976, when Gerald Ford, who was from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and my family being Republican.
That was a big day.
It was when I came downstairs and asked my parents who won. They said Jimmy Carter, and I burst into tears. So whether that's true or not, it's a great political story. I love it. They tell me it's true, but I always loved it. But I didn't know how to get involved. You know, I didn't have family connections, and we were, my parents from Michigan, that type of thing. But I got to know Kevin. And so I called up in 96 and got involved in Johnny's Senate race. Then we didn't win, and I was trying to get into law school. And
Not that time.
But I went to law school, practiced at Alston and Byrd. Johnny goes to the House my third year, so I helped on that race. It was a special election, a little short race. He won, and I so badly wanted to go to D.C., but Heath Garrett, who's my consultant now, one of my closest friends, he was working at Troutman Sanders, then worked for Johnny, and he said, "You got to go practice law first. You can't play politics. You got to go practice law. Go do that.
Go figure out what we do here."
Exactly right. So I went to Alston & Byrd, which is a great firm. But in the meantime, then I went to the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, and then Johnny runs for the Senate. And that's when I went in as campaign manager. We won that race. I went to D.C. as deputy chief of staff, became chief of staff. And that got me into the political side of things.
You know what's funny, and this is more for the kids at home who get interested in it, and they're like, to your point, I don't know anybody in politics. I don't have any connections into the business or whatever. I always tell people, it's a mud puddle. It's not like a giant ocean of people who actually choose to get into it. So they're not, I won't say they'll take anybody, but the barrier to entry, if you're looking for a foot in the door, there's a lot of county commissioners and people that have virtually no money that need help. And it is the best experience you could have if that's what you ultimately want to pursue. You're not going to get rich, but you will learn how every single part of it works.
Well, particularly if you're willing to do it for free. If you're willing to volunteer,
and people do,
and they do, and that's how I did it. I joke around. I started off as a volunteer, got promoted to intern at the same pay grade in 1996. But you're right, and I do the same thing. Find somebody that you like or know that is running for mayor, or city council, county commission, school board, state house, or state senate, because they always need help, and you will get the best experience you possibly can. Then do a statewide race. I tell everybody, statewide races are fantastic. 159 counties, 12 million people. It's unbelievable.
I always say 152, but that was because I moved here after we did like the Georgia year in social studies. And so they're like, we have 159. How do you always get this wrong? I was like, well, it's still too many counties.
I was going to say, you didn't take this class in like 1920, did you?
You know, the people up where I live in Alpharetta and Milton, they still remember when there was a consolidation effort that will ultimately go nowhere. I think they knew it would go nowhere then.
But there was a Milton County once upon a time.
But once upon a time, there was. And they wish they had it back all the time. He's going to leave that one alone, and I don't blame him. This is Extra 106.3, Atlanta's only news and conservative talk station. I have Attorney General Chris Carr as my guest for the entire hour. But Attorney General Chris Carr is not all you aspire to be. Talk about why you're here other than the fact that we're all friends.
Yeah, no, I'm running for governor. And I'll tell you, Ben, I really feel called to do this, in part because, you know, I got that experience in Washington with Senator Isakson, who, again, I think is just one of the great public servants that we've ever had, did it the right way for the right reasons. But I got to learn all those federal issues. I was in the private sector with Georgia Pacific and Alston and Byrd. Then I go to economic development with Nathan Deal, and who was just a great governor who, again, wanted to talk more about the issues than the politics of things.
Was that fun?
I loved it.
I loved it. Let's step back. You're running for governor. I get it. Is that the best job you ever had?
It was fun. I have loved being chief of staff and commissioner of economic development and attorney general. They're different, but the satisfaction level, but all of them were fun. To be able to sit in the front lines of history and deal with those federal issues was great. Going into a community and helping the private sector bring 84,000 jobs. That changes somebody's family, it changes their life.
With car manufacturers, I would imagine.
So we're some.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, there was a lot of advanced manufacturing, distribution, fintech. I mean, there was just so much going on between 2013 and 2016. Because when you think about it, Ben, we were coming out of the 2008 crisis.
Yeah, it's not fun. I was a part of that.
People had cash then, finally. Companies wanted to do something. And we had a state that had a governor, a legislature, and local communities that were willing to
we
work.
were hungry.
We were. And it was a fun time. So I love doing that. But then as AG, the thing that I have now, government is supposed to keep people safe. That's it. And what we have said is, we don't care your race, your gender, your religion, your sexual orientation, where you live or where you're from in this state. You deserve to be safe. So the legislatures give me authority over domestic terrorism and human trafficking, gangs, organized retail theft, all different areas. But when you look at it, who are the communities that are most terrorized when you have a prosecutor that won't go after this criminal activity, or you've got folks that won't focus on? It's lower income, racially diverse, and immigrant populations.
Sure.
And we
Almost
conservatives
always.
and we Republicans are the ones that have recognized that, and we're the cavalry that's coming. And I'm very proud of that. I'm proud that we've transformed the law department into from a civil practice only to a very effective criminal practice as well.
I say this celebratory, or in a celebratory way, as somebody who is relatively sheltered. But every week when I sat on the city council in Alpharetta, we got the police reports, and we had 31 hotels. And it didn't occur to me that even in a community of significant means, that was such a drastic issue in our community, because it was featured. And look, we did the right thing. I was just reading this. I was like, who are these people? Where do they come from? It is a lot better than it used to be, but it is still something that it kind of opened my eyes to be like, man, even in the places that are really nice, there's some it was always drug overdoses, Narcan, human trafficking over and over every week. It wasn't like, almost, I don't say this to like put us down, but our people didn't know that.
And it wasn't an issue.
Right.
People thought about, they didn't realize human trafficking was occurring either at all or B in the way it was. Look, when I ran in 2018 and Governor Kemp ran, the media went after us saying we were creating an issue. Both human trafficking and gangs.
You can open records request anybody's like weekly police report. I promise it was a thing.
And we kept saying this is an issue. Gangs, because the gang investigators came out with a report that were 75,000 identifiable gang members. That was probably low, but we got criticized for that.
Yeah.
Now
they know.
There's training. People recognize it, and nobody wants human trafficking or gang activity in their backyard, but they see it, and they just want to know somebody's doing something about it, and we are. Over 200 victims we've rescued, 200 lives forever changed. Over 60 convictions on the human trafficking front, 100% conviction rate on child sex trafficking. On the gang front, we're now over 100 convictions, and Athens is a great story. Athens had a DA that said there were no gangs. She was the one that wrote the memo, here's the categories of crimes I'm not going to enforce, and gangs were one of them. There was a gang war going on, and in 3 years we have dropped shootings by 40%. Murders have gone from 8 in 2023 to 0 this year, and I'm proud of that.
You should be. This is Extra 106.3, Atlanta's only news and conservative talk station. Chris, I got about 30 seconds left. Tell people how to research your campaign for governor and where they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, go to carforgeorgia.com, go on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. You can find us all over the place.
Well, we're going to work on that for the next segment. Hell, just Google me. My name is Ben Burnett. You can find me on Instagram at the Ben Burnett Show. This is Extra 106.3, Atlanta's only news and conservative talk station. We will be right back with Attorney General Chris Carr. Welcome back to the Ben Burnett Show on Extra 106.3, Atlanta's only news and conservative talk station. My guest for the hour is Attorney General and candidate for governor Chris Carr. Well, we survived one segment, but I have to tell a funny story. So your beautiful wife, Joan, wanted a water. So I was glad she suggested that because I'm about to take a swig of mine in your next answer. And in the refrigerator, there were a couple of cold beers. And I grabbed them to bring them out to see if anybody would notice. And Chris was like, geez, it's early, Ben. I was like, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. General Carr. I want to talk to you. Let's get into the nuts and bolts here over the issues that you think matter most to Georgians and why you're the right fit and so forth, because very rarely are you going to get 23 minutes or 25 minutes to sit there and we can get into some stuff in 25 minutes. You can't do it in 2 minutes, and you spend a lot of your time doing 5-minute bits. Talk to me about the highlights of why you're the right fit and what you think the Republican Party's got to move, add, and change. And look, I don't care. You can take a shot at me, whatever you want to do. Let's go.
Not doing that. Look, jobs and safety. I mean, Ben, if you looked at what the 2024 election was really about, it was about job safety and immigration. That's first time in modern history that if you were a Republican, Democrat, or Independent, the top 3 issues aligned, and then issues 4 through 10 changed.
Yeah, sure.
If you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, but that those were the issues. Well, the issues of jobs and safety are still the top issues, and we have done that well in this state. I think we are a model for both bringing jobs and creating jobs and supporting business, but also keeping people safe. But we can't take that for granted. So the experience that I have, having been in Washington, having been at economic development, and now as the Attorney General, matter. The issues that we got to continue to focus on in those areas, literacy, workforce is the number one issue. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, everybody's still talking about workforce and AI. And AI's here. And how do we deal with it? How do we prepare for it? But literacy matters, particularly from birth to 5. If you're going to learn to read by the 3rd grade, you got to have that foundation. That's an area that we've got to be able to focus on. Got to align the curriculum with the jobs of the future. And with AI, again, we're seeing now, some pauses in hiring, whether that's permanent or not. I was reading an article that one of the CEOs of one of the AI companies said, look, some people may lose their jobs to AI, but what you're probably going to do is you're going to lose your job to someone that knows how to use AI better than you do. Well, we need to make sure our kids are prepared to use AI. In addition, who's the future millionaires according to the Wall Street Journal? It's those that have skills, the trade skills, and because you got to be able to build the building, you got to be able to wire the building, you got to be able to maintain the building. And we did a great disservice in this country when we took shop out of high school and we told kids that were great at working with their hands.
And you told me I should go to college. Like, and I'm being serious.
And instead, that somehow you're better. Well, I'm all about people going to college. I want people to go to college. But I also want some great plumbers and electricians and long-distance truck drivers and master mechanics and the people that really are going to be building the country and continue to. So we've got to focus on that as well. We got to have a balanced legal environment. Businesses can't be the ATM just to file lawsuits. And you also have to have access when you have a dispute. So I think what the legislature's done was good. I think what the governor did focusing on tort reform was good. We got to continue to focus on that as well. Infrastructure is a huge issue. When you have the ports of Savannah and Brunswick, fastest growing ports in the country, economic engine in and of themselves. You have Hartsfield, Jackson International Airport. You are 2 days by rail and truck and 2 hours by plane to 80% of the U.S. market. We should be the logistics hub for North America, if not for the world, because of that infrastructure. Plus, and this is coming from a double dog, God bless Georgia Tech. If you draw a circle around Georgia Tech and the tech companies that we have, fintech, mobility, logistics, entertainment, we've got this ecosystem that could create that next mile, that efficiency using AI that can help bring down costs and speed things up. We've got that. And then we got to have the lowest tax burden in the country. But, Ben, here's the thing. I think that we can over time, we can bring our income tax down to about 3%. I think everybody's kind of agreed over time we could do that. But you cannot eliminate the income tax without raising taxes on 90% of Georgians. And I'm not going to run for governor raising taxes on people's backs. But I hear about property taxes. And I don't care if you're in Atlanta or you're in Savannah or Thomasville or Statesboro. The issue of property taxes is real. We have to be able to cap assessments at 2% of the rate of inflation. We had this bill that was passed that allowed counties to opt out, and it just isn't working. But we've got young people that are trying to buy a house, be able to afford that house, that aren't able to do it because their assessments just keep going up so fast.
Sure.
And so that's an issue that I think we got to focus on. And then on the safety side, I always say that is what government's supposed to do, plus it's an economic development issue. Nobody's going to locate a company in this state or this city, or they expand their customer base or come for conventions or World Cups or national championships if people don't feel safe. And one of the issues that has to be addressed is mental health. Whether it's the root cause of poverty or homelessness, mentally healthy people don't pick up guns to shoot each other. If you look at our jails, they're full of either folks that are suffering from addiction or traditional mental health ailments and issues. Our hospitals we've got to be able to figure out a way to focus. And that's going to take federal, state, local, for-profit, nonprofit, and faith-based groups coming together to address that issue. But that is a very big one. We have $1 billion that's coming into this state as a result of the opioid settlements that we entered into. That's going to help on the addiction side, particularly in rural and exurban Georgia, where you just don't have treatment options, and sheriffs are arresting the same people over and over. So those are the issues I think we're going to have to deal with going forward, and I have the experience and the understanding, the motivation to do it.
So you have said a lot in the last 5 minutes, and I will pick up and I will take them piece by piece. I could honestly blindfold me and throw something at a dartboard. I'd probably hit something you just said. So you've done this a time or two. The state income tax is I wrote a column in the AJC about this a month ago. It's like, if I was going to eliminate the state income tax to zero, this is legitimately how I would do it. And I don't think there's necessarily the political will with the General Assembly to do it the way I would have done it, or the way you would do it, or anybody else would do it. But that is going to be a super popular tagline in a governor's primary. And that puts you in a different stance than someone else. Talk about why that is the right fit, and if something about reducing it to zero is disingenuous, talk about why.
Because this has been studied. It was studied by the Purdue administration, the Deal administration, Speaker Ralston, the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. Speaker Richardson looked at this. This is an issue that's been looked at. The only way that you can eliminate the income tax, you're going to blow a $18 to $20 billion hole in the budget, is you then have to raise sales and property taxes or fees or something else. one of my opponents has said, the lieutenant governor has said, I'm going to take away all the tax incentives that we give, which has helped build this state. And people don't like tax incentives generally, particularly if you're a true conservative and fiscal conservative. But that's what happens in economic development.
And I believe in subsidizing things that make sense.
And advanced manufacturing. But to take away all of those incentives will destroy economic development. In addition, he said he's going to bring casinos to the state to help pay for the elimination of the sales tax. But the only other way is to add it to groceries and legal bills and oil changes. And that starts really becoming a kitchen table issue. And by the way, I am not for raising taxes. And that is going to raise the tax burden on 90% of Georgians. But I do think we can reduce it, still incentivize those people that are going to Florida. And remember, Florida's got Disney World, and they tax everything.
And they've got Miami.
And they tax everything, or fees, or Texas got oil, and only one state in the nation has ever eliminated the income tax on ordinary income, and that was Alaska when they discovered oil.
Yeah. And they pay people to live there. And I still don't want to live there.
And we have the lowest tax burden. Tennessee's a little bit lower than us. So we're in the bottom 10. So we don't want to destroy what we have. We want to enhance what we have. But property taxes are the issue. I am hearing from more people. Income tax sounds good. I agree. It's a little bit flashy. But if you want to talk about a kitchen table issue, it's really property taxes, and make sure we get a handle on that.
So I worked in incentives and zoning and entitlement in the data center space for years. And I knew today would happen long before most people knew today would happen. And I think some of the answer is there when you hear in a public service commissioner race about what these data centers are doing and how they are consuming power. That doesn't meet the barometer of your average voter because they don't understand, because they haven't had a brownout or a blackout yet.
Right.
And I do firmly believe if those companies, and this sounds like a liberal stance, but if you're going to have the Magnificent Seven, who largely sit in that space, and we've seen NVIDIA have a market cap of $5 trillion. Right. If we raise their property tax by by 1 mil or 2 mils, or you did something utilitarian, a utility type tax to those people, that is dispersed across the entire country or the East Coast because of Atlanta's proximity, and it's an internet hub. There's nowhere else they can go to get. Latency is their big enemy. And I think there's something there. This is the thing I hope happens, and I'm not convinced that it will, but I would like the governor's race to be an intelligent conversation. Right? I don't want it to be, we're going to reduce the state income tax to zero because that's what everybody wants to hear. And I don't want to hear Burt Jones is an unethical criminal, because I get it, man. You got to get elected, and he's got to get elected. And Brad Raffensperger, who we have not heard a lot about, has got to get elected. And those two dudes come from a different place than you and I.
Sure.
And that doesn't make them evil either. But talk about things in this economy, they have changed, like the data center example. And I don't think the General Assembly I don't think they've known how to have that conversation about, if these companies are worth $5 trillion and the QTS data center in Fayette County generated $100 million in fees or near it for the Development Authority to go subsidize other projects, right? That's what people don't understand. We want that here. That's a good thing. We want NVIDIA to want to come, or Amazon or whoever, because there's people underneath there. There's code. There's all this. But I'm the guy who believes that the tax burden should be low, and I think that there's kind of a too big to fail element of a $5 trillion market cap in 2025. Man, talk about the balance there, and like the conversations that we have to have as Georgians that have not happened at this point, that you think you're the right guy to have.
That's right. And my leadership style is to sit around the table and do it. I've shown it. Because, again, most AGs came from private practice or were prosecutors, so they had one skill set. Well, I came from the legislative and the economic development side. I had to sit down, whether we were in Washington with Johnny, try to figure out a way you get 50 plus one votes.
Or 60.
Or 60. God. And then go to the House and then get a president to sign it. So you had to sit down and figure out how to work together. Economic development, same thing. A company wanted to be in the state, but we had to figure out what locality, from supply chain to customer base to workforce, you name it, logistics, you name it. We had to sit around a table and figure that out. And now I've done it as Attorney General, working with the First Lady on human trafficking, gangs, organized retail theft, opioids, all the task force. That's what we got to do. And data centers are a great example of that. And I think what you just said, Ben, there's a lot of truth to it. Yeah, these companies, the Metas and the NVIDIAs and
they're enormous.
And they've said that they're willing to invest as well. I agree. I think they should. What I don't want to do is force a data center on any community in Georgia that doesn't want one. But I don't want to prevent a community from having it if they do. You know, pick a community in Georgia that maybe doesn't have a lot of economic development. If there's a way some of our counties that are really struggling could figure out the way to do it, let's do it.
It would eliminate property taxes in plenty of places.
And it would improve people's lives. And then you tell, because you know better than me, but over time, isn't the data center going to become more efficient and smaller? Yeah. And aren't we going to figure out maybe the smaller nuclear, as soon as we figure out security and commercialization? You know, it's not a Plant Vogel, but it's a more commercialized. There are things that are going to change over time. I want to be able to sit down with people that actually know what they are talking about and solve that problem for Georgia, because as I am told, Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, and Atlanta, Georgia, or the state of Georgia, are three of the best places where we can solve this problem and maximize.
A lot of smart people.
There are.
In all of those places.
And we can maximize it and figure out a way to do it. So that's my leadership style, is to bring people, sit around the table and solve the problem. I've told some of the legislators, you're not going to have a better partner than me. I watched it. I watched Governor Deal sit down with Speaker Ralston. I've worked with Speaker Burns. I've saw Johnny Isakson do it with so many other. That's where I learned this from, and it has been successful, and that's what I'll bring as governor.
You mentioned Plant Vogel, and I don't know that I think people recognize that it's a big deal, and I don't think they know why. But I imagine in more than one role in your career, you have worked on something that I thought would never come to actually open and come to fruition.
All three of my roles.
And it probably took a little bit. I mean, it didn't move quick for sure. But talk about what that means, and just, you know, as a chief of staff it's a huge deal to America, really the Southeast. But talk about all the different ways you worked on that and what you knew it would ultimately mean and why.
Yeah, so it started with Johnny. And what was interesting is when they came to us with Plant Vogel, Isakson had been the one that had worked on Vogel 1 and 2 in the 70s to change Georgia law and to work on making sure that we could build those first two facilities. So you're working with Southern Company and the delegation, and all of us were working very well together on making sure that there were some loan guarantees and some things. Because remember, this was the first nuclear facility built in the United States since 3 Mile Island.
Right.
Going back to the 70s.
It had the potential to scare people.
And we hadn't built them. And yes, it took longer, and there were some change. But again, we hadn't done that we hadn't done it in the United States. But if you are about clean energy, nuclear has to be part of it. And you know this, Ben, but the myths of 3 Mile Island and what had happened there were greatly exaggerated. I mean, it wasn't, this thing that destroyed the country or whatever it may be. But that's the policy that had been created, was based on the myth of 3 Mile Island. Nobody had built facilities. We had, and I'm proud of the fact that, again, it goes back to us having reliable, energy that we're willing to be forward-looking. Johnny was always talking about, let's load up the buffet, whatever makes sense. And at the time, again, solar I know has gotten better as far as the capacity to store. We don't have a ton of wind like people do out west. We don't have as many sunny days.
Unsightly.
They are.
I lived in Hawaii, and it's just, every time I go back, they're putting another one up. And I'm like, this place was the most beautiful place on earth.
And it doesn't make sense for us. But nuclear does.
Yeah, it does.
And clean coal does. And so we have to have that reliable system. You talked about brownouts and blackouts. Look what's happened in a lot of states. Texas don't have partnerships with their utilities. Texas was a great example.
Yeah, and those are our people.
And so, but we've done it the right way.
Yeah,
and we were willing to take that risk. And over the in the long term, it is going to benefit Georgia. It's going to benefit the country too, as you said.
Well, it's to me the greatest part about America, and people. We fight over all sorts of stuff, and we fight amongst our own party, sometimes in our own state. But I like the fact that there are 50 places that can do certain things differently, and we get to figure out who's right or who's the rightest. Because in 10 years, California is afraid of nuclear energy. They just are. And look, they got a lot of people and they're going to have a huge demand on their energy. They're going to have a realistic conversation about it sooner than later. And it is clean and it is safe and the rest of the world uses it. And I think the next 10 years is an education period across the country of like, this is not like the end of World War II. Like it's a different thing. I want to change gears with you.
And power generation is going to be an issue as far as the eye can see. That's going to be globally.
Totally.
That is an issue, and we have to be able to address it and deal with it. And I think we're in a good position to do it.
I do want to. You said the small nuclear reactors. That's not going to get you elected as governor. That is going to be wildly interesting to see who gets that the rightest.
Yeah, and I want us to.
I want to ask you about the ethics complaint, and I want to ask you about the lawsuit against the what's it called, the legislative committees. And I want to preface this.
Just one committee.
Legislative committee. I'll be honest with you. I'd have gone a step further. I think they're awful. And I think that as governor, I would love to hear your commitment that you will work to get rid of them, because I do agree with you that they are unfair. I also think that it's look, your name's on the ballot. You get to make your own choices. I wouldn't have done it. I know there are people on your team when you guys were talking about it. They were like, I don't know. When you talk about the meritocracy, I know you're smart enough to know that you're surrounded by people who offer you different points of view. And sometimes you win or do what you want. Sometimes they win and you're like, I can see it your way. Talk about what your issue was and why you chose to go about it that way. Because if I know one thing about the governor's race at this point, and this is sad, it's that happened.
Yeah, and it's not done. I'll tell you, we're not done. It is not right for the lieutenant governor to abuse the system. And that's what he's done. Look, whether you like the leadership pacts or not, they were passed by the legislature, signed by the governor. The governor's using it appropriately. The speaker is using it appropriately. The governor's using it for governor things. Speaker's using it for House things. The lieutenant governor has chosen to use it as a stepping stone to run for another office. Not to use it for Senate stuff, not to use it for the lieutenant governor, but to run for governor. He can't do that. A federal court said that he couldn't do that. The federal court said you need to go after the whole law, and that's where we're trying to make our minds up. In addition, the law doesn't say he's I'm going to air quote this, loaned himself $10 million in that leadership pact. You can't loan money to a leadership pact. Why does if the lieutenant governor wants to be the governor of the state of Georgia, why does he snub his nose at the laws of this state? That's dangerous. So all I said is the rules of the game have to be the same if you're running for the same office. Federal judges agreed with me. We're just trying to figure out what we're going to do next. Well, we filed an ethics complaint too, and you know went faster than any ethics complaint I've ever heard has been taken up. One issue has. And there are still issues with the ethics committee that they need to look at and give us an answer.
Well, I've never talked about this publicly, but I'm just going to air a grievance. I had one filed on me in February when my Senate district was opening up. I have not held elected office in almost 4 years. And I was like, I didn't know it was opening up. And I was like, who the hell cares about, like, are these people serious? And I had to spend money to hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I hired Ryan Germany, and people asked me why, and I was like, well, he beat President Trump. I figured he was a pretty good pick. And I said, that's not ideological. I was like, I'm not getting in trouble. I don't want a misdemeanor on my record or that I did anything, whatever. So I'm very grateful to you, Ryan. And that wasn't fun, and it was dismissed faster. Yours was dismissed faster than any I had ever seen. I assure you mine didn't move that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
From first-person account. It was like, hey, they have 30 days to respond. I was like, good Lord, these people are threatening me with legal action. Look, I don't think it's I understand why somebody would do it in a campaign. I do. So on one hand, and I agree, I would go, I don't like them, because if you want to complain that money in politics is bad and there's too much of it, I think I like Governor Kemp and you like Governor Kemp. I think that decision was his worst mistake, because he has opened the state of Georgia up for, if you wanted to say quid pro quo or whatever. I think it's a holistic problem. There is no reason that guy is term limited out. There are 1,000 ways you can go advocate for your beliefs with your donors. You don't have to necessarily do it for that reason. And I disagreed with the strategy. That's the extent of the difficult questions.
No, and good people can. But as a rule of law guy, you have to follow the law, particularly when you want the top job in the state. That's my belief.
My name is Ben Burnett. My guest is Attorney General Chris Carr, candidate for governor Chris Carr. This is Extra 106.3, Atlanta's only news and conservative talk station. We will be right back. Welcome back to the Ben Burnett Show on Extra 106.3, Atlanta's only news and conservative talk station. My guest is candidate for governor Chris Carr. Chris, I want to talk to you about, I think one of the cool things that you've done that people don't know is that you're kind of out front on the drug boats. And when I learned this, I was a little bit surprised because what does the Attorney General in Georgia have to do with this? But I want you to talk about it because this is all over the news right now. Have you seen drug boats getting droned out of the sky in nearly every ocean? Go for it, man. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so you want to talk about the thing that keeps me up at night's fentanyl. Ben, they're lacing fentanyl in everything. Cocaine, marijuana, heroin, meth, you name it. And unfortunately, we are seeing more and more kids dying all the time. I have friends that have lost, sons to fentanyl overdoses. We're working with the Jack O'Kelly Foundation, young man from North Atlanta, went to University of Georgia. We did a program up there. We are losing 100,000 Americans every year to drug overdoses, enough that fills Sanford Stadium. And the question has been, does the President of the United States have the ability to protect Americans by attacking those drug boats? And I believe he does. People said, oh, they don't have uniforms. It's not a declared war.
Look, I've asked the question because at first I was like, I don't know, man. Something feels weird.
Just because they don't wear a uniform or detonate a bomb, they're detonating the equivalent of a bomb that has killed more people than were killed in Vietnam and Korea every year. And how do we look those parents in the eye and say, we're going to declare war on fentanyl? We see it coming across the border. And I'll give the president credit. What he has done to shut down the border is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely remarkable. Human trafficking, gangs, fentanyl, big issues that we have to deal with in the state. And the left always drove them crazy when we'd say every state is a border state when you don't.
Right.
But it is.
Absolutely.
But it is. And fentanyl, half the people that are dying from drug overdoses are under the age of 45. The other half are over because they're getting pills and they're having a surgery, whatever. But I believe the president does have the authority to protect Americans who are dying every day due to drug overdoses. And these drug dealers, cartels, organized crime folks know that. But if he doesn't, as a lawyer and rule of law guy, Congress should give this president or any president the ability to go after those that are intentionally killing Americans.
Why in the hell can our Congress not do anything?
It is frustrating. And again, as a creature of the Senate, and my wife is a creature of the Senate, we're big believers
in the process.
But it is just unfortunately broken, and I wish they would. I wish they'd go back to work. I wish they would do things, not just the shutdown, because I think the shutdown is a Democratic. This is all political theater. Don't get us. I mean, that's all this is political theater because their base has told them they haven't done enough to go after the president.
But I mean holistically.
But step back. When the government opens back up, do things. They're AI. National security, this issue, human trafficking. I mean, the list goes on and on and on that we need Congress. Laws change in this country at the federal level through the legislative branch. When they don't, we get what's happened over the last 15 years. Obama stopped going to Congress. Trump stopped going to Congress. Biden stopped going to Congress. And the executive branch doesn't make laws. They issue executive orders and regulations that are supposed to fall within those laws. But it typically doesn't because it's political people that are pushing this. I was a big fan of DOGE, but the way to do that's through Congress, not through the executive branch, because there's only so much that they can do. I wish they'd go back to work.
I am so frustrated. So I'm a small business owner. I sound like I sit on the radio to all you people. Dude, this is a love of the game thing. Nobody's getting rich right here. I promise you that. But I got my I guess ACA quotes for next year, and the line from my broker was like, if you choose the Affordable Care Act, it is going to be an increase of about 30%. Chris, on what planet is there a year-over-year 30% increase on anything? And that is so broken.
But we were told that was the solution.
That's the worst legislation of my lifetime.
We were told, but here's the thing, Ben. Everybody said, well, give us the flexibility at the state level to do what makes sense for us. And what makes sense for Georgia may not make sense for Montana or Texas, but give us that flexibility, the ability to do it. I'll go back, association healthcare plans. If we're talking about 20 to 40 million people that want healthcare that can't get it, it's the independent contractor, the realtor, the dentist, the electrician. Let us pool together. This goes back to 2006, 7, 8. Isakson tried to push for this. And the Democrats said no, which told me at that time, this wasn't about access.
No.
This was about single-payer health care.
Totally. They want to break it. And they break me in the process.
And they said it worked. This doesn't work.
I want to go kind of rapid fire with you.
Okay.
Through the end. Are you in favor of letting the people of Georgia decide on gambling, or what's your stance?
Well, that's the way it would have to. I'm opposed to brick and mortar casinos.
Yep.
I'm opposed to horse racing. Online sports betting is just not my issue, but I'm not going to stand in the way if that's what the legislature, the people of Georgia want to do. I think we have to acknowledge the benefits as well as the risks, but that's one where I think if the legislature and I'm not going to lead the band, and I'm not going to stand in the way.
The expansion of Medicaid.
We just talked about the ACA. I'm very concerned about expanding it. Now, am I interested in figuring out ways? I would love the federal government to give us the flexibility to allow there to be I'm a believer in the private sector. I want people that want to have coverage to have access. I want the two waivers that we've gotten at the state level that Governor Kemp got to have time to work. But I want to see a Georgia-based solution and not have the federal government force it down us. I want us to have the flexibility to be able to do things make sense for us.
There are 1,000 places I could go, and I want to give you the last little bit to, one, have the content creation opportunity that you want, but why are you the right choice, and what is your pathway to get there in May or June?
Well, I'm the only Republican that can win the primary and the general. I mean, some folks that are running in the Republican primary, they can't win the primary. And there are some folks that just can't win the general. I can win both. Why do I know that? Because in the 2022 primary, just 3 years ago, in an environment that everybody said was kind of tough for me and Governor Kemp, I got 75% of the vote. 3 of 4 Republicans saying, we like your brand of conservative leadership. Burt Jones got 50.01. Brad Raffensperger got 53. I got 50% more votes. And when you look at, again, how elections are won, 48, 49% of Georgians wake up Republican, 46, 47 Democrat, where 6% of the electorate in 22 went Warnock, Kemp, and that persuadable voter who cares about jobs, safety, education, don't want to talk about social issues, candidate quality matters. You got to be able to appeal to them. It's going to grow to about 10 to 14%. I'm the one that can appeal to them and beat the Democrat. Otherwise, we.
Last question. Does the Isakson model ever, one-word answer, does that day ever come back to this country?
Yes.
I agree with you, and I hope you're right. Chris Carr, give everybody your social media.
Carr for www.carforgeorgia.com and on Instagram, Twitter, and all the other platforms.
We got to work on that one, man. I appreciate you coming in. This is Extra 106.3, Atlanta's only news and conservative talk station. Have a great balance of the weekend. We will see you guys again next time. Make it a good one.